Dharma and welcome back to my channel 5 Minute Economics, where I teach economic concepts in a span of just 5 minutes. The topic for today is the Say's law of market, which is a very important law from the point of view of classical theory of economics or classical theory of employment, which we commonly call it as, and we'll be doing this in pretty much detail today. So yeah, let's get started. Also guys, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and help me reach 10k subscribers really soon, and do follow me on my Instagram handle 5 Minute Economics. So basically, before I move ahead, let me give you a little background about the Say's law. So Say's law was propounded by Jean-Baptiste Say, who was a French economist in the 19th century, and hence the name Say's law. Basically, this law is a very important law when we study the classical theory of employment. Initially, actually, I was planning to make a video on classical theory of employment, but then I thought it would be way too long. And let me first explain a smaller concept, and definitely I'll come up with an entire video on the classical theory of employment. But Say's law holds a major part of that particular theory, so one should know this first properly. So now moving ahead to what exactly does the Say's law states. The statement of Say's law is supply creates its own demand. This statement might just sound very simple to you, but it is not. It has a lot of hidden meanings behind it. So firstly, supply creates its own demand. Let me tell you what is that. Basically, Say had mentioned back in the classical school of thought times, he had said that whenever a good is supplied, whenever a good is produced, it is automatically demanded by the people. How? It is so that when people produce the good, so obviously they are giving money, income, like for example laborers, they are giving wages for the production of a good, and they then have purchasing power because now they've got money, they've got wages, so they go and demand the other goods. So basically when supply happens, demand happens later on because of supply. So basically supply creates its own demand is that. It means that production creates market or demand for goods. What I just explained to you, when we produce, they get money, they get purchasing power, and obviously then they tend to demand the goods. Next, which is also a very important proposition under Say's law, is that there can be no overproduction of goods. Why? Why did it say that? Say had mentioned back in classical theory of thought, he has mentioned that always what happens is whatever is produced is consumed by the people. In normal situation, what happens is whatever production happens, there will always be a demand for that, and hence there will be no overproduction. So basically he had not taken into account deficiency of demand. He always said that whenever there will be production, it will be absorbed by demand, and that is why aggregate demand will always equalize with aggregate supply in the economy. So these are the two, or I can say, major propositions of Say's law. He had also mentioned that savings also equalize to investment. How did that happen? So basically whenever we get money, income, and we kind of spend it on consumption, some part of it is obviously saved, right? What had Say said, he had mentioned that whatever money is saved is automatically investment, is vested into investment. It is invested. So basically savings always equal to investment, which is, do you think that is true? We'll come to know that later on. But basically he had said that whatever is saved is ought to be invested. It is not kept with you, but you tend to invest it, and hence obviously there is no overproduction of goods. So now guys, let us quickly run through the assumptions of this law. So number one is optimum allocation of resources, which basically means that all the resources are allocated in different channels in equality and proportionality. Next, there is perfect equilibrium between demand and supply. Next, there is perfect competition in both factor and commodity market. Next, there is a laissez-faire policy of the government, which basically means that government doesn't interfere in the economy. It leads to automatic adjustment, and government just doesn't interfere in the economy. Next, there is market automatism. Basically, this means is when there is rising population and new firms and new people are added in the economy, they are automatically absorbed by different channels of production. And lastly, there is long-term equilibrium. So equilibrium is seen from long-term point of view. So now guys, moving ahead to the implications of the Say's law. Basically, what does the Say's law implies? So firstly is automatic adjustment of full employment. So basically this means that in the long run, a free economy, Say had mentioned, always tends towards full employment, and we are always at full employment in the long run. That's what he had mentioned. there is no deficiency of aggregate demand. So, we just studied that supply creates its own demand, there is no overproduction. So basically, there is no possibility of overproduction and no possibility of deficiency of demand, because AD, AS both always equal to each other. No problem of general unemployment. So basically, when there is no problem of overproduction, there cannot be a problem of general unemployment, and that is something which was highly criticized. But yes, she had assumed that always we are at full employment in the long run, so there is no problem of unemployment. Money has a very passive role. Basically, money has a very passive, or I can say a neutral role, because it doesn't affect the production process much. And lastly, rate of interest is a determinant factor. So rate of interest plays a very important role. I told you previously that savings always equal to investment, right? S is equal to I. So what they had had mentioned, that even if because of some reason savings is more than investment, or investment is more than saving, it is rate of interest, ROI, which steps in and basically brings equality between the two. So the reason why savings always equal investment is because there is rate of interest which steps in, and it acts as a very important strategic variable and equalizes the two. So lastly, guys, let us move to the criticisms of the law, which are very much important, and most of the criticisms have been given by Keynes. So we all know after the classical school of thought came the Keynesian school of thought, and Keynes highly criticized the Say's law. In fact, a funny incident, some days back someone had mentioned in one of my videos that Keynes is like that uncle who goes to every wedding and criticizes the food, and that's so very true, because if you see in economics, most of the theories have been criticized by Keynes. So let us come to number one. Long run self-adjustment is not possible. So how Say had mentioned that in the long run, there is full adjustment, economy will always be at full employment because full adjustment takes place. But Keynes was someone who believed only in the short run. His words are, in the long run, we all are dead. So he obviously believed in the short run and not in the long run. And he said that, the self-adjustment, the problem of unemployment is not solved because of self-adjustment, but can be solved when, rate of investment is increased. Next, money is not neutral. So in this theory, money has been treated something very neutral and passive. They've always treated as like a barter of exchange economy, barter system, exchange of goods. But Keynes gave highly importance to money. He said, in fact, money is a medium of exchange. People store money for unforeseen contingencies, which was ignored by J.B. Say. Next, overproduction is possible. So, how it was mentioned that there cannot be a problem of overproduction because, supply creates demand. People, consume whatever is supplied, but that is not true. There is a possibility of overproduction. It might happen that, all the income, what is not consumed is saved, and what is saved is not investment. So in that case, if it is not invested, then definitely we can have a problem of overproduction. Next, underemployment situation. So basically, how Say had mentioned that we are always at full employment. As I mentioned to you before also, this will be highly criticized. But of course, we can never be at, obviously we cannot be at full employment always. In fact, there are so many people who are willing to work at the prevailing wage rate or even at a lower wage rate, but are unable to find jobs. So he said, Keynes had mentioned that full employment is a very rare or very special phenomena. In fact, we are always at underemployment situation. Next, equality through income. So as I mentioned, savings and investment always equal each other, because even if there is some discrepancy between the two, ROI steps in and equalizes S and I. But that is not true. Keynes had mentioned that can be possible because of income and not because of rate of interest. And lastly, which is the very most important criticism, is that demand creates its own supply. So as you see, Keynes totally tumbled up the whole law, which was supply creates its own demand, to demand creates its own supply, because he said that demand is the kingpin, and if there is no demand, there cannot be any supply. If people demand, then only can be the supply be there. So he gave highly due importance to demand. So that is all about Say's law of market, guys. I hope this video was useful for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video pretty soon.